Hi, this is Jeff Cassman, Creative Director with Invocabo, and this presentation is designed to help you see how to host great webinars. Let's get started. One of the things that we've discovered after preparing, hosting, reviewing, and optimizing many webinar-based sales funnels is that it's extremely important in your webinar that you solve problems for your audience. Many of our clients start off with the idea that a webinar is designed to sell. But we have learned that that's not really the case. And to be most effective, especially in a high ticket environment, what you need to do is demonstrate credibility, expertise, and develop affinity with your audience. And that happens by solving big problems for your audience quickly. When you do this through a webinar, you demonstrate your expertise to the audience and you prove your credibility by doing what you promised you would do. And this is a great way to develop a relationship quickly with someone that you did not know before the webinar. Another key aspect that we have found from webinars is that it's important for you to give them something extra in order to stay on the webinar. As webinars have become more popular, as people have more experience with them, that extra incentive for them to remain on the webinar towards the end to get something, perhaps it's a free book or it's a free infographic or it's a transcript of the webinar, something else of value that you're going to give them for staying on towards the end of the webinar. That helps to improve the show-up rate and the perseverance of the webinar attendees. Now, I also recommend that you, in the webinar, after you've shown them what you can do for them, you've helped them solve their problem, that you offer them the additional help. In other words, you're going to give them the do-it-yourself option of how to solve their problems, just with the basic outline. And then you're going to offer to the person the professional expert level mentoring or coaching or assistance to help them through that process. And then finally, of course, you want to qualify your audience. You don't want to work with everybody that's out there, everybody that might stumble along your webinar. So the webinar helps you to identify the people who are a good fit for you, whatever those demographics or psychographics may be. So let's talk about how the introduction to the webinar should be handled. First of all, you want to define the audience. You want to make sure that you identify who the audience is for, and then you want to tell them what you're going to tell them, right? It's just our normal process of doing presentations well. We're going to outline for them what they're going to learn on the webinar, and typically this will include some bullet points of what they're going to learn. Then I also suggest that you make a big promise. You tell them what these bullet points are going to mean for their life. It's a benefit-driven promise. So the bullet points, for example, may be what I would call features, or in the marketing business, for example, if I was doing the webinar, some of the things that they might learn would be how to use Facebook to generate leads, or how to write sales copy to be more effective, or how to improve the open rate on emails. These might be the things that I would include in a bullet points as examples from as a marketing agency. The big promise, the benefit-driven promise that I might use might be, we work with a lot of educational organizations, it might be how to fill up your classroom on demand whenever you want, even if you know nothing about marketing. So the features support that big promise. And then, of course, we want to reward perseverance. So this develops a relationship where you offer the client something, you then give them that something, and that reward experience helps to develop affinity more quickly. They see the value in that. They have gratitude towards you for this gift that you've given them. And of course, the gift has some value and relevance to you. So it should always be relevant to the audience. I do not submit to the idea that we should give gifts that have monetary value but are not relevant to the scope of the webinar. And of course, you should always put a value on something. If you don't put a value on something, then it's easy for them to not appreciate it very much. So if you have a book that you normally sell on Amazon for $19 or $29, that should be the value. If you give them a case study or a free report that's worth $99, let's mention that. If you don't do that, then it's just a free gift, and guess what? Free gifts aren't worth anything. The next step is to frame the webinar. So we want to explain to them what they believe their problem is. And by doing this, you're going to help identify with the audience. You're going to ask them questions that prove you understand their problem. So for example, if I'm working with a physician, a cosmetic surgeon, I may say, do you have an automated marketing system that generates appointments for you on demand? Do you have a online calendar that allows your new prospective patients to set an appointment with you without engaging any personnel in your office? If I'm working with a university or a private school, I might ask them if they have a unique selling proposition that allows them to differentiate themselves from other schools in the area. If I'm working with a therapist and a psychiatrist, uh, I might ask, do you see too many prospects who are not really a good fit for your style of prospect? They're not in the right place mentally. So I ask my audience these questions to demonstrate to them that I understand their problems. These are the concerns they have in their mind. So by doing that, I'm framing the webinar. I'm framing the range of our discussion. Then what we want to do is reframe. And by reframing, I'm explaining to them that the real problem is something else, that they've identified a symptom, we might call it, but not really the cause. Or they're intimately familiar with the effect, but not the cause. And I'm also showing them that third-party objectivity is very important. So, for example, in the marketing business, I frequently hear from clients that they don't have enough website traffic, that if only they had more traffic to their website, that would solve their problems. I know that that is very oftentimes not the case, or at least that's not the most important problem, because more of the wrong people coming to your website is just like more of the wrong people coming to your physical office. That's not going to solve your problem. So the problem may be with your ads or your targeting or your landing page or your funnel or your qualifying process or your pricing strategy. The problem may be the office location or the direct mail piece that you're using. So by reframing them, I'm helping my audience to understand that I understand the real problem and not just their perceived problem. And let's face it, I'm a third party, right? So objectivity is important. If you go to your doctor and you describe a problem, you may perceive it as having one cause. Your physician is objective, right? He can see the forest for the trees. He's not caught up in those minor little details, and he can compare a number of different data points to reach a different conclusion that you may. And so this is what we're doing when we reframe the webinar. Next, we want to do what's called future pacing, or what's more simply called painting pictures in the mind of your audience. And so we want them to visualize the future. What will be different in their life or their business after we solve the problem? So we're going to solve the problem, and we're planting that seed in the mind of our audience. What's going to change in their life? And we want to identify those outcomes very specifically. So let's say that I'm working with a dentist who is a specialist with cosmetic implants and cosmetic dental surgery. And what he wants is he wants more of those ideal clients who know exactly what they want and who can write a check to have those implants done. That's what he wants. So if I identify that we're going to solve that problem, and the outcomes are going to be that he's going to have a schedule full of these, and what he really wants is to be booked out 30, 60, 90 days, what is that really going to mean for him? What's going to change in his life? Well, It's always easy for clients to say they're going to have more money, but in reality, what it means is probably he's going to have less anxiety about how he's going to pay his overhead next month. Perhaps the additional cash flow is going to allow him to take more vacations, and maybe that means that his wife is going to be happier with him. Maybe it means he's going to be able to pay off his school debt, or he's going to be able to pay for college for one of his kids, or he's going to have a second home, or he's going to have a second location for his office practice because now he has the confidence that he's going to be able to recruit even more patients to that second location. So, understanding the benefits that are associated with the problem solving and helping them to experience that in the course of the webinar does several things, not the least of which is it causes them to feel good, and this affinity that they're developing in your relationship is very important. Now we have to talk about the change that's going to happen. So in our webinar, we want to begin to introduce the changes that are going to be necessary to achieve these things. So this is where we start to transition, and we tell them, here's what you're going to have to do to change. And I like to put a number on it because the human mind likes to grasp onto and cling on to to concrete things, not abstract things. So, for example, we all know about the Ten Commandments, right? Or the Bill of Rights, the 10 amendments to the Constitution that were so important here in the United States, or the 3 rules to success, right? So putting these numbers on things helps people to understand them. And you might say something like, if I'm working with private schools, I'm going to say, the 7 steps to maximizing enrollment. Or if I'm working with a personal trainer who specializes in working with professionals and entrepreneurs and high-powered executives, he may say the 5 shifts in exercise to lose weight and build strength quickly. Or if I'm working with a relationship coach who works with men who are struggling to find and keep the right kind of women in their lives. The point of the webinar might be the 6 ways to find the woman of your dreams and stay married happily. So this is how we frame that change. And then what we're going to do is we're going to tell them in the webinar that they're going to have that today. They're going to have that formula. We're going to give it to them. This is not some bait and switch. It's not, I'm going to give you the headlines and then you have to make an appointment with me to find out exactly. We're actually going to tell them those things today so that a person in the right position who understands that message, who's prepared to act on it, can act on that based on the information we've given them right away. This is the point at which we introduce ourselves to the audience. And the idea here is a 30 to 60-second biography. The webinar is not about you. The webinar is about the powerful information that you're going to share, the solution to their problems that you're going to give them, and the benefits that they will experience in their life and business as a result of that new formula. So you're going to do this by explaining your qualifications. This is where I talk about giving the resume. So for example, I might say that I've been a direct response copywriter. I've sold tens of millions of dollars worth of product online and offline. I've been a media buyer, buying advertising for my clients in the days of TV and radio and now digitally. And as a creative director for Invocabo, I've managed entire marketing campaigns, the selling funnels, the brand building, everything from A to Z. And then, after I've given my resume, I'm going to tell an authority story that builds on that resume and links to the topic. So I might explain that at Invocabo, we've taken clients who are in the e-commerce business and we've tripled their conversions. We've taken clients who were losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on their media campaigns, and within 60 days, we've made them profitable in the 6 figures. Or I might talk about working with a private school that grew their enrollment and their revenue by 30% in just 90 days. So I'm sharing an authority story, a first person testimonial, if you will, that builds upon that resume. So this is what you'll want to do. but you want to do it in 60 seconds because the webinar is not really about you. The webinar is about the value of the information. And this is critical because a webinar is part of the system that you're building. And it's the strength of that system that will make this work and make it scalable, not the strength of your persona, not the strength of your bio. Now we're going to get into the central part of your webinar. This is where we introduce the change. So we're going to start with the core content of however many changes it was that we were recommending. And we're going to talk about the key principles also of how to communicate those changes. Now, these are marketing and persuasion principles that you're going to use when you introduce those, let's call it the 7 changes. I always like to start off with a shocking statement. This is a proven direct response marketing principle. The shocking statement is important to get their attention. We live in a world in which there are a great many demands upon our time and our attention. So shocking someone and getting their attention is very important. And we don't shock necessarily with vulgarity or being crude or offensive, but we need to get their attention. And so like a headline that talks about the blind golfer, or the headline that talks about the woman who had tried to get pregnant for many years and had given up, and then suddenly she discovered this little secret that allowed her to get pregnant, and that changed her life. So whatever the solution, whatever the problem is that we are offering a solution to, let's talk about that shocking statement that's involved in the change to get their attention and hold it. Then we introduce the evidence and the credibility to support that statement, because we don't want to be the inquirer where there's this clickbait headline and there's no substance behind it. So then we support that statement with third-party credibility and proof of it. Then we want to talk about the consequences both to taking the action and achieving those things, as well as the consequences of inaction, or what I like to talk about, the lost opportunity cost, whenever we can quantify it. Here's what will happen if you do X. Help them to understand that. Help them to understand the benefits of taking action. And then here's what will happen if you don't do X. And so by spelling all of that out, we're helping our audience to develop that connection with these things. And we're starting to force that choice in their mind about whether or not they want to do this. And of course, this is important because if you're using a webinar, you want the webinar to help you to filter out your prospects, to help the people who are really motivated to take action and work with you, and the people who are not motivated sufficiently, they're just going to disappear. And of course, you've got to teach something meaningful here. There has to be actual substance that you're including here that really is relevant. And of course, you share powerful testimonials and case studies to prove that what you're saying actually works. And then finally, to summarize those points. So these key principles that you'll use, these are communication and marketing principles. You will then apply this same process to each one of those, in our case, 7 changes that you're proposing for your prospect. Now, at this point, it's important to review the content that you've shared. You're going to summarize those 7 changes that you've recommended, and you're going to introduce a more detailed testimonial or a case study in greater depth. And the reason for this is you want to be able to say, here's how it worked in this person's life. In my case, I might say that Invocabo worked with a local private school. They had a lot of unused capacity. Or consequently, their return on investment that was not what it should be. They felt like they were losing ground to more sophisticated competitors. They implemented our marketing principles. They filled up their classrooms within 2 months, and they had a waiting list for the very first time. And in the private school business, that's really the top 1% that have got that waiting list, where people want to be in the school and there's not any room for that. That's where you want to be. It shows the demand for your brand is so high. So I might include the brand name of the company, talk about some of the metrics, talk about those changes, and then show the results. Now, I always like to then again, using the same proven presentation principles that have worked for ages, remind them of the promises that I made at the outset of the webinar. List those steps again. I told you that I was going to show you how to do X. I've now told you the 7 key principles and so forth and so on. Just review those. And this is very important to prove that I'm credible, that I do what I say I'm going to do in my webinar, so there can be no doubt of the value that they've received. This is a good step also for the free giveaway, whatever it is that you're going to give, your book, your audiobook, your infographic, your transcript, recording of this webinar that you're going to provide for them so they can listen again. Maybe it's an interview that you've done on a topic that's been recorded. You're going to give that to them. It could even be free access to something. If, let's say you've done 10 of these kinds of webinars on topics that are going to be of interest to them, you could give them a membership directory where they could log in and listen to those, whatever the case may be. So this is where you say, okay, go to this website and you'll get access to these things, or send me an email and I will send you a link to download it. Whatever that step may be, this is a good place to do that. The next step is to offer them the free consultation. So the first step in this free consultation approach is to review the do-it-yourself approach and contrast that with the work with an expert approach. And I like to lay out the pros and cons of each of those. And again, here we can refer to the analogy with a physician. It's very easy today to have a symptom and go to Google and tell Google that, I have such and such physical condition, what's happening, and I can try and self-diagnose. So to use a personal example, about a year ago, I was experiencing this symptom where my eyes were twitching, and I wasn't sure if it was the new big screen monitor I had in my office, if it was the updated prescription glasses that I was wearing, if it was my contacts, if it was my allergies, if it was stress, if I was tired, all of these things, right? So I'm trying to evaluate this and I'm doing research. That's the do-it-yourself approach. The expert approach is to go to my physician who has all of my information and looks at me and says, you know what, I think you maybe have a magnesium deficiency. Why don't you take a magnesium supplement every day and see what happens, and voila, the problem is solved. So understanding and outlining the pros and cons of each approach here provides more value to the audience, because if they are fundamentally a do-it-yourself approach person, they will appreciate that and they will feel more confident that they're doing the right thing, and they will filter themselves out of your webinar funnel. Conversely, if the problem is big enough and important enough and the pain of our prospect is high enough, they will want to work with an expert, and they will appreciate that you have outlined for them the value and the lost opportunity cost of this. And so this is the point at which you offer the free strategy session. This is when you say, now, if you appreciate what we've talked about here, if you want to work with an expert, if you're looking to make significant changes in your life or your business model quickly, sign up for this free strategy session. Remind them it's not a sales call, and it truly is not, because you don't know at this point whether or not you want to work with that person or with that business. You don't know if they're a good fit for your model. You don't know if you can solve their problems or not. You don't know if you're going to have the right kind of relationship with that client. So it's very important that you have that initial consultation, that initial diagnosis. And again, if you were to go see a professional, let's avoid the physician for a moment. Let's talk about an attorney. Attorneys have many different specialties. If you go to an attorney with your problem and you share everything, he's going to listen and then respond and say, this is not my specialty. I don't specialize in property disputes of an agricultural nature. I specialize in commercial litigation, and he's going to refer you to someone else. But that initial consultation is necessary to get to the core of the problem, and you're going to do the same thing to find out if you have that right relationship, that right specialty with the person. So it's very important to qualify them at this point on the webinar before you even get to that consultation, because you don't want to be doing consultations with the wrong people. So we go through a series of steps to say, now, if you're interested in working with my firm, if you're interested in working with me, here's an example of people we have been able to help in the past. So you give examples of your customer avatar. So in my case, I might say we have a great track record of working with private schools to help them with their enrollment, to bring to them more of the right kind of students who are going to be able to pay their tuition on time, students who take their education seriously, students who have siblings perhaps that are going to join them at that private school, or who have friends who also take their education seriously and can pay. Or it may be people who are in the real estate business, or people who are financial advisors, or attorneys who do the right kinds of practices. We might, in our webinar, give examples of those customer avatars. What are we doing by that? Well, number one, we're helping people to decide whether or not they are in one of those categories, but we're also reminding them of our success in each of those categories. So we're reinforcing that credibility that we've been there and done that. So you'll be doing that as well. But you're also going to say, now here's who we do not work with well. And we would give examples of that. And so I would outline, even for ourselves as a marketing agency, here are the kind of clients that we've not had success with. And we might talk about an e-commerce business that's selling $9 widgets or $20 products, and the profit margins on those kinds of items are very, very small. That makes it very difficult for an independent advertising agency such as ours to be successful with them. Or other examples of the clients that are really not a good fit. You'll want to do this as well to filter out those people so you don't have a single conversation with someone who's not a good fit. Plus, you're reinforcing with your audience that you are, in fact, an expert. And experts and specialists don't work with everyone. They work with a very specific kind of person that they can have a tremendous amount of success with. So when we conclude the webinar, what are the steps? The next step is to push them to your online calendar so they can sign up on your calendar automatically. Secondly, once they've booked that appointment with you, they should be redirected to a questionnaire. That questionnaire allows you to gather more information about them before that appointment for two reasons. One, you want to make sure that they really are qualified. If they provide information on the questionnaire that tells you they're not a good prospect for you, you can cancel that appointment so that neither of you waste the time. Secondly, if they are a good prospect, if they do appear to be a good fit, you're going to make the best use of that time. We want it to be a 30-minute call or a 45-minute call. We don't want it to be an hour or an hour and a half because of your time and value and the time of your client. So if you're better prepared for that call, there are a lot fewer questions that you'll have to ask, and you can demonstrate to your prospect a mastery of their situation, and you can work on building that rapport quickly with your new prospect. Finally, during the webinar, I recommend a Q&A, and what I normally recommend is that you have a series of the top frequently asked questions that your prospects have and use those as stock questions for the Q&A period of time. Hearing those frequently asked questions and hearing you address those frequently asked questions on the webinar will allow prospects to again develop a rapport with you more quickly. They will hear in those frequently asked questions the sincere interest and desire by other people to learn information, and they will hear in your genuine replies that you know what you're talking about and that you care. So this is just one more opportunity to teach and for them to get a sense of how you operate, how you talk, what your relationship building skills are like. Just a couple of final observations. The slide style in your webinar can vary. So in this example, this presentation, I've had to use a very basic PowerPoint style slides. You can do something like this, or you can do something that's very pretty and has heavy graphics. That's up to you. And it may be something that you want to split test. I like to use the straightforward presentations. They work well for us. It's a reflection of our no-frills business kind of approach to solving problems. I don't want to oversell with a beautiful webinar a beautiful presentation that's very sexy and attractive, when in fact I'm just kind of a nuts and bolts kind of guy. So keep that in mind. It should be a good fit for your personality. I like these desktop-based presentations. I can be in my t-shirt. I can give this webinar from anywhere in the world as long as I've got an internet connection. But some people really like to be on screen. They might want to have that little inset where it shows them live talking to them. I tend not to like those, and the reason for that is that it becomes distracting. And the person who's on camera is performing. The person who's watching is now consumed with watching and judging me. Did I brush my hair just right? What's going on in the background? Uh, is what I'm seeing consistent with what I'm hearing? And I find that they're distracted by that. They're not paying attention to the words as much. They're not paying attention to the message that I've chosen for them because they're focused on watching me. So if you're building up a personality cult, if you're building up that kind of guru look at me approach, then it becomes more important that you do those on-screen kinds of things. If your business model is about value creation and information and processes, then I believe it's not as necessary. Finally, in terms of time, I like to recommend a 45-minute webinar. Now, if you can get it done in 20 minutes, you should. You want to give them as much valuable information as quickly as is reasonable. But 45 minutes is an acceptable number. More than that, I find to be far too much, and usually the result of a poorly planned presentation. Remember that the average adult 10 years ago had an attention span of 50 minutes. When they're concentrated, they're paying attention, and they're motivated, 50 minutes is the max. After that, they want a smoke break, they need a bathroom break, they're losing their attention. That was 10 years ago. Today, it's much, much less because of all the distractions. So going longer than 45 minutes, in my opinion, and based on our experience, is not worth it. Your enthusiasm and your credibility is vital. You want to show that you're interested in this topic. You want to work very hard on your intonation, your enthusiasm, your pronunciation. You want to vary your speed and your volume of conversation. You want to do a much better job of that than I've done on this presentation. You really want to think about it as acting. And not acting in that you're being false or fake, but acting in that you're putting into those words, that conversation, all of the appropriate emotions. Make it sound like it's important to you. Make it sound like you care, and your presentations will be more effective. I always like to talk about scarcity on availability. I don't want false scarcity, but if the truth is that I'm an expert, that I'm a specialist, that I'm busy helping people, and I already have clients that I'm serving, and I already have other people that I'm supporting, then I'm not available all day, every day, and neither should you be. So you should schedule out what days of the week and what times of the days you're available to take these initial free strategy calls. And it's not 4 times a day unless you really have nothing to do. So I would recommend that you have a Monday afternoon, a Tuesday morning, and a Thursday afternoon, or some example where you've blocked those times off on your schedule. Those are the times that you've set aside for these kinds of calls. And the rest of the time, you're busy doing something. It's creating a product, it's creating a service, it's serving another client, it's focusing on your own professional education and development. But when you block those calls off and people see that you truly are in reality scarce, because remember, they're going to be looking at your online calendar, they're going to see that you only have a few of those slots. And they're going to be reminded that you told them you only had 3 slots, and now they see 3. Or they may see that you, in fact, don't have any calls available in the next week because those 3 slots have already been taken by someone else. They're going to have to wait for the following week. This is consistent with expertise and specialty. If I want to go see a specialist, it's going to be harder to get in to see him than it is to see my primary care physician. Why? Because he's a specialist. He's in higher demand. So it may take me 30 days to get in to see that specialist. So you don't want to create unnecessary scarcity, but you do want your availability to be consistent with your message. You don't want to be that guy who hosts the webinar and says he has room for 3 new clients, and you go on his online schedule, and guess what? He's available 10 hours a day, 5 days a week for the next month. that incongruous message will cause your webinars to fail. I hope this presentation has been helpful to you. This is what we do at Invocabo. We're very excited to work with clients like yourself. Here's how to contact me if you have any additional questions.